If you've spent any amount of time watching photography YouTube videos or browsing photography forums, you'll know that everyone is always going on about the magic of the very first X-Trans sensor that Fujifilm made. It's up there with the whole CCD sensors are superior mentality, one which I certainly have talked at length about with my opinions on the Leica M8 and Ricoh GRD3. But interestingly, Fuji only put that X-Trans 1 sensor in just two cameras, the XE1 and this, the xpro1. But is it still worth buying one today? Well, in this video, I'll answer that, show you a bunch of images taken with the xpro1, and stick around till the end to hear all my thoughts on this relic of a camera. Also, be sure to subscribe to see more great photography content. So this is the very first Fuji XF mount camera ever released, coming out in March 2012. No, not even the OG X100 had this sensor. It actually had an older non-X-Trans sensor, with the X100S getting the X-Trans 2 sensor. And like many people who watch photography YouTube videos, I was always really interested in the reported benefits of this older sensor. You know, the classic, oh, it's basically like shooting film and how things just look organic. But unfortunately, all this hype has made it that these xpro1s are now selling for like $1,000 Australian dollars, which I just personally thought was a little bit too much for such an old camera, despite having never used one. Enter this xpro1. So one night after a few beers, I was browsing Facebook Marketplace, as I usually do, looking for interesting camera related things, and I stumbled upon this xpro1, listed at $600 Australian dollars, with the top plate having so much distressing it looked like it'd been dragged behind a car for a few kilometers. So beautiful. And it had also been reskinned with its grip removed. But I was immediately drawn to this thing. It just looked so unique and interesting, and I figured that for the right price, it would be a fun thing to check out and make a video on. So I offered the seller $500 and he accepted. So the next day, I headed into the city to pick up my new to me xpro1. And to say that I was excited would be an understatement. I was so ready to see what the hype was behind this legendary sensor. And when I received the camera, I noticed that this distressing appears to have been done professionally, because it is so clean and nice that there is just no way that this was done from years of abuse. So the reskinning is done in Akiyasai faux lizard skin leather, and this camera just looks unbelievable. And I think, how hot does it look with this, with the silver 23 f200 as well, with that square hood? Like, this thing just looks so sexy. Yeah, the two-tone panda sort of combination. I love it. This is like the hottest camera I have. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. The seller mentioned to me that he'd actually bought it off a Yahoo Japan auction, and it came looking like this, and he was selling it because he just didn't use it much. So, interestingly, I looked at the serial number on the bottom of this camera and I checked online, and it appears to be that the serial number is actually of the very first batch of xpro1s ever manufactured, which alone makes it even cooler. This is like the real OG, like one of the very first ones. And I knew that the best lens to test with this camera would be my all-time favorite, the Zeiss 2 at 32mm f1.8. Seeing as when I had an X-Pro 2 early last year, that was the lens that just performed so damn well on the X-Pro body. And putting it on the X-Pro1, it just felt like a perfect fit. However, immediately upon using it, seeing as I'm so used to the X-T5 and the X-H2S that's recording me right now, the camera felt archaic and ancient. The EVF was terrible. Everything felt really slow and average. I was just worried that this review is going to just be me telling you guys that this is an overhyped camera and you probably should just skip it. But I figured I would give it a bit more of a go and just try shooting with it for a bit longer to see if I actually end up vibing with it. And boy, am I glad I did. Because as soon as I popped in that SD card into my computer and reviewed the files, I was blown away by how beautiful they looked. So one of the things that I really missed about my X-Pro 2 was just how great the files looked, especially with the Zeiss 2 attached onto it. They had this organic nature to them that the more modern Fujis just don't have. Well, the X-Pro1 is basically that, but even better. And the more that I use this camera, the more I learn to understand its remarkably simple and uncomplicated menu system and user interface, and the more I began to fall in love with it. See, the X-Pro2 I felt was a camera that had quite a lot going on. Like, it was great, but it felt a little bit cluttered in my opinion. With this X-Pro1, however, everything has been stripped back to the bare essentials, and the buttons are all big, super easy to press, and there's hardly any of them as well. So it just is so simple, and the camera's built so nicely too. It's so beautifully made, and I think the reskinning really makes it look very, very unique. And I love the fact that it's missing. It doesn't have the grip on it anymore either. I think it actually makes it look a lot cleaner and makes it look a lot nicer as well. It really elicits a similar feeling that the Leica M8 does with its sheer simplicity. Now, is it as good as the M8? Well, no, it's not quite that nice, but this is one hell of an easy to use and most importantly, fun camera to shoot with. Does the screen suck? Sure, you can't really tell if the image you just captured is actually in focus until you get home, but that's also a problem with the M8, and I still love that thing. Now, the hybrid OVF viewfinder is interesting. I think it's a cool feature, and I've always thought it's a novelty feature in like the X-Pro series and the X100s, but honestly speaking, having it set in its rangefinder mode, like the OVF mode, which by the way, it's not a real rangefinder, despite what some people might have you believe. I had a lot of comments on the M8 video with people saying that the X-Pro series is cheaper, it's cheaper rangefinder. No, the X-Pro series is not a real rangefinder. It looks like a rangefinder, but it is not a real rangefinder. Anyway, I noticed that the focus would just miss the easiest shots, something which was not the case when I had it set to the EVF mode. So I don't know if there's some sort of setting that I haven't enabled, but like when I would switch modes between the EVF and the OVF, in EVF, it would almost always hit focus, but in the OVF mode, for some reason, it would just miss really frequently, which is a shame because using the OVF mode is really fun. And it is nice that you can kind of see, like a real rangefinder, you can see sort of outside of the frame that you're getting, which is cool. I do enjoy that. And definitely, when you turn off all the displays, it does make a camera feel a little bit more like a film camera, but I just noticed that so many missed images, like missed focus, just because I was using that mode, and I just ended up not using it at all really, because I feel like, I would rather have the shots come out in focus than have a slightly more enjoyable experience taking photos with this thing. But the EVF, it also sucks. So, using manual focus lenses like my Voigtlander 3514 is terrible. You've only really got one form of focus peak assist, and the color is white. And with how low resolution the actual screen is too, it's really difficult to actually get critical focus with it, especially wide open. But, all of this doesn't really matter, because that isn't where this camera's benefits really lay. So, if you're buying this expecting earth-shatteringly quick autofocus or insane dynamic range, I can stop you right there because this is not the camera for you. In fact, I don't actually think any Fuji is really the camera for you. Maybe you need to buy a Sony or something. The benefits with this camera lay in the same place that the M8's benefits lay. And in fact, in the same place that a lot of Fuji cameras lay. In pure photographic enjoyment. It is just so much fun to shoot with. And yes, I know it's cliche to say that the camera makes you slow down and enjoy photography more, but it really is true. I just love shooting with this thing. Does it miss focus in times where it absolutely probably shouldn't have? Absolutely. But when it does get the shot in focus, my God, the colors and the tones are just out of this fucking world. Like, how beautiful are these photos of the 5 Ferrari hypercars that were at the Ferrari Melbourne dealership the other week? Snapped them with the X-Pro1 and there's ice to it. The red in the cars just comes out so beautifully. And these were actually edited with my Lightroom presets. So here's a little before and an after, just so you can see what the presets look like and what they do. They work perfectly with the X-Pro1. In fact, they're tuned to work with Fuji cameras. The link to them is in the description. Every purchase helps to support me and this channel. Now, in terms of handling, in terms of using this camera, I would say, honestly, stick to smaller lenses. Because, yeah, once you stick something bigger, like any of the 1.4 primes, it just unfortunately becomes way too front heavy and uncomfortable to use. And to see just how ridiculous it can become, here is what a 50mm f1.0 looks like on it. Yeah, it looks stupid. That's what it looks like. Look, it does unfortunately lack the eye detect autofocus of the later model Fujis, so you are stuck with just a single autofocus point to move around, but honestly, that's alright. Like, I just half pressed the focus and recompose, and I noticed that it was pretty reliably hitting focus. even using lenses like the 56 1.2 wide open, which was certainly not something I was expecting. And it's also really easy to move the focus point. So you just hit this little AF button next to the screen, and then you just move it with the D-pad. And the D-pad is big, clicky, really, really responsive, and it's just really nice to use. All the buttons on this camera actually are really, really nice to use, which is surprising. Maybe it's not surprising, I don't know, but it's, I was not expecting it to be as pleasant to use, given its age, but it's perfect. It's really, really nice. I also thought as well, like missing the joystick the X-Pro 2 and later cameras have would be unfortunate. It's actually totally fine. Like, it's really not an issue. And I'm so used to being joystickless at this point that it's not really a problem. And now, you might be concerned about parts availability and being able to repair this camera, you know, should it break. But the great news is that not only did Fuji release the last firmware update for this camera in September 2020, a solid 8 years after release, but they can still service and repair this camera as well. And, you know, with how well it's built, I mean, made in Japan and all, I have absolutely no doubts that this camera will last many, many years to come. And I also, you know, recently reacquired the 23f2, as I was saying earlier. This is a lens I had back when I had the XE3 in 2019, my first sort of dabbling with Fuji, and I absolutely adored it back then. I had a black one, now I got a silver one. It's awesome. This lens is absolutely fantastic. I think it's really, really good, and it was so cheap as well. And yeah, I think this and the Zeiss goes together so well on this Fuji. I think I would love to get the 18f2 again, just because I think that would work really, really well on this X-Pro1. That's just how much I like using this camera. Like, it's actually become, like, I've actually honestly had more fun shooting with this than my X-T5 at this point. So I don't know, maybe I'm just bored of the X-T5, I don't know. But I do really, really like it. It's a really, really cool camera. Another really cool benefit of the X-Pro1 is its battery life. So I noticed that the battery life on it is actually really solid. So I thought with the older batteries, like the NP, I think they're called the W126S, you know, that you would have pretty average battery life. I got actually 4 batteries with this camera as well. I think they're all genuine Fuji ones, but the battery life's great. Like, it lasts like 400 shots. If you turn your back screen off and you just use the EVF, which was actually my preferred way of shooting, as it really made you feel like you were shooting with an old film camera. And the ISO performance is also really, really good. So I can comfortably shoot at 1250 to 2500 ISO and get really usable images, which is awesome, especially compared to like the M8's shocking ISO performance. And I think at 800 ISO, the grain structure and the noise really sort of resembles film grain, which, you know, I think it's actually really interesting. Like, the photos just look, I don't know, it's hard to explain. They just look, I hate that word, but they look organic. They just look really nice. I love the colors. I love everything that this sensor can put out, and I'm totally believing all the hype on it now. I think it's absolutely sensational. And I think the fact that it was only ever in 2 cameras kind of makes it really like unique and special too. Like, the X-Trans 2 sensor was in like a shitload of cameras, but the X-Trans 1, for some reason, Fuji only really kept it in 2 cameras, and then they quietly got rid of it and brought out their second one. So will this replace my X-T5 or X-H2S? I mean, is it even comparable? Well, when I first got this camera, I would have said, no way, it's far too slow to be comparable. But after my time using it a lot over the past few weeks, I get more and more confident knowing that I could probably use this for professional work and still get away with it. I think the only thing really holding me back from using this for professional work is the lack of dual card slots, which the X-Pro 2 and the X-Pro 3 have. But, you know, it is what it is. I think that's probably the only thing that I don't like, is I really wish it had those dual card slots. And also eye detect autofocus, although that's probably wishing for too much. But I'll just take 2 card slots maybe, if I could just like make the perfect X-Pro1 for me. But yeah, look, overall, I'm super impressed with the images and overall user experience with using the X-Pro1. And for 500 Australian dollars, I think it's amazing value. In fact, I would say that up to around 700, maybe 800 if it was in really, really nice condition, would be the upper limit of what I'd be paying for one of these. If you can find one with that price and you are looking for a very special camera which produces sensational images, look no further than the X-Pro1. So what do you guys think? Have you ever shot with an X-Pro1 or an XE1? Do you think the X-Trans 1 sensor is worth the hype, or, you know, is it best to just leave this as a relic in the past? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.